Okay, that's streaming. Hello, Facebook. And let me pull up MLS. We're ready to go. How is everybody? Good. Oh, wait, we don't want Matrix. We want Express Forms. All right. So, how's your week? That's it? Just started? Okay. Actually, the week started Sunday, doesn't it? Were you out doing opens, showings? There is no beginning of the week in real estate. Haven't you figured that out? Every day is the week, no matter what day. There's no beginning or end. It's endless until you're knee deep in clients, and then maybe you'll start having a life because you'll hire assistants and start a team. Okay, so what's going on with contracts? Questions? Anything that went on this week? Yeah, go ahead. Dripta?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a buyer.
Yes.
Because I had an agent tell me you don't need to include it.
No. No. Question is 22E. Do you include it in your contract? Absolutely. It's you write it. I mean, you probably send it over with your contract. Oh, okay.
She said you don't need to include it.
Well, I would still put it
I put
22
it the
in.
same.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt your contract. Doesn't change the terms of a contract, but most of all, it protects your client. And the seller still needs to answer line 14 on page 1, checking the box if they are a citizen or not. And the main reason you're doing this to protect your buyer is that you all need to be aware if a foreigner sells a house and they don't get caught as being a foreigner and then they're paid all their proceeds at the end of the sale and then they, let's say, leave the country, then the government will come after you, or your buyer, to pay all taxes that foreigner may have owed before they skip the country. Because FIRPTA, what it does is when they say they're foreign, the escrow is required to, depending on the price point, keep so much, like 10 to 15% of the proceeds they keep, and they send it to the government, and then the government audits the foreigner to make sure all their taxes are paid, because if not, they'll apply all this money towards their taxes. And then if their taxes are current on, then they'll refund the money. But it may be about 9 months before they get refunded the money. But it's really important that you do the 22E and you get the seller to sign 14, because that gets your buyer off the hook. So if they lied, they're off the hook because we're going off what the contract said. That way the government can't come back and sue you, because the government says it's the buyer's responsibility to notify the government that this foreign person has just sold property. So it's one of those not fun. But what lots of people don't understand, and that is on line 14, when you send your contract over, that's the only part of the contract you're not checking a box. And the seller then, let's say, signs off on the entire contract, doesn't change anything, but they check, no, they're not a foreigner, that box, and send it back. And we're getting agents who say, well, you need to initial that because we changed the document when we checked the box. MLS has come out, and the lawyer from MLS said line 14 is the only thing that both parties don't have to initial when the seller checks it, because we all know that you can't check that box when you send it to the seller, and we all know that the seller has to check the box on the return. So because we all know that, there's no need for everybody to initial around 14. When they send that back, if they sign the whole contract and they check that box, and then they're saying you need to initial it before you have mutual, they're wrong. You had mutual the minute they sent that back because they had signed everything. Okay?
So that almost essentially.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the sellers have to check it. And if ever you get a contract back and that's not checked, you send it right back because you want it checked. Because if you ever close a contract, you never have that answered, you don't have a 22E, your buyer's on the hook with the government if they're foreign and they leave. Right. Yeah. Well, a lot of people do that now. They'll have the 22E filled out by their sellers beforehand, whether they're foreign or not, just as, just like they will pre-do 22J or a K. But you should put it in your contract. Okay? Next question.
Okay, so even if that
Yeah. But when you're saying your contract, you would send the completed 22E because the seller already completed it and it's attached. So you would send that with the contract over. It's just like, when they attach 22J or 22K, on a listing and they pre-filled out part, it's the same thing. You just take those to fill out the rest and send it with your contract. The buyer only signs if they're foreign. If they're not foreign, the buyer doesn't have to sign it. Okay. Oh, for inspector referral? No. No. 41D inspector referrals, we're only required on buyer's disclosures, not seller disclosures, because your seller's not hiring an inspector. Yeah. Yeah. And on the internet, they should have the pre-made forms that we've made you guys, that you just check the box of everything you gave them and they sign off. Right. Good question. If you advise your seller, or if your seller just out of the blue chooses to have their home inspected and then offer that to buyers, a couple things. First, you email me because I can't officially give you the KW form, but I can share with you what other lawyers and other agencies have already put out. And it's a seller, it's kind of like another disclosure, but they have to sign it, the buyer, and it says this is basically, it'll say this is a seller procured inspection that we're offering to any buyer to look at, but we're also saying this is part of our Form 17 now, and that we're making no representations on it, and that you buyer can still do a home inspection if you want. It says all these things to protect your seller. And so what I recommend is that you would pre-make this like on a 34, have your seller already sign it, have it attached to your documents, like your K and your J or whatever. And then in your agent remarks, I would say, seller has inspection to provide to any buyer, email listing agent with Form 34 attached, signed by buyer. We will share the inspection. Don't attach the inspection report to the listing, because how do you know who's looking at it? How do you know who's serious about your place? You don't want to just give it free. You want, one, to make sure you have that signed document to protect you. And two, if they're sending the document and asking for the inspection, now you got their contact info, and this is someone that might seriously write an offer, so you have a better gauge of what's going on. So that's how I would do it. Okay? But email me, and if you email me, I'll send you what I have for language. No. Question was, if you have your inspection and you're lucky enough not to be in a multiple offer and you had to do a pre-inspection and waive your inspection in the contract, but you actually had to write a normal offer, have an inspection period, do your inspection, now you want to negotiate. So the question was, do you send the full inspection report back with your negotiations? Only if you really want to be a jerk and you're trying to jab that other agent some way with a screwdriver, you might, but I would highly advise you not to, because once you send over a whole inspection report, that seller and that agent are put on notice now of everything in there. So that if your deal falls apart, technically they have to go redo their whole Form 17 and disclose all these things now. Or some will choose to just send the whole inspection over to the next buyer and say, here, you may read this. But agents get very upset with you. So if you're negotiating, it's not wise to send over the full inspection report, because right there, you just pissed off the agent that you're trying to negotiate something for your buyer. So that's one strike against you before you even start to say, here's what we would like to have the seller do. All you want to do is send the part of the report that talks about the things you want to negotiate on. Yeah, you just send that one page. You just make a PDF of that one page, and you'll send that over with it. Same thing if you're have additional inspection days you're requesting, send just the page, because you have to show where the report says, the inspector says you should get a more qualified opinion of a contractor or whatever they say, but you want to send that page of the contract where it says you need to hire another inspector to come in and look, or a contractor, I mean, and then you send that with the 35 hours saying you're taking your additional days. All right? No, no. When you're working with a buyer or a seller, once they sign the disclosures, you don't have to have them sign disclosures every offer. You just have to have them sign the disclosures once. And if you're, let's say you're working with a client who's going to sell and then they're going to buy with you, I just send them the buyer disclosures up front. And I have them sign that while we do the listing and throw that, because that's okay, because then I can also then dump it in the new file when they buy. So they're only signed disclosures one time.
Where did you say you found that on the
I don't know where anything is. I'm like the dumbest guy in the office. So I just know these things are on intranet or wherever. But the ones that are on there is Law Agency, Lead-Based Paint Pamphlet, Guide to Home Inspection 41D, and now Wire Fraud. Those five are on the buyer side. And then the seller side is Law Agency, Lead-Based Paint, and Wire Fraud. Okay, but the new ones are on the intranet. You can ask Erica or Kayla, and they can show you. Okay, so are you brand new? You're brand new.
We all started like a month ago.
Okay. Oh, but so y'all started at the same time? Okay, so do you know where the videos are for contracts that I've done, so you can refer to them? Okay, just like to make sure when I see new faces.
We also send that wire.
That's part of your disclosure now, wire fraud. Then if they've already signed your disclosures and you're still working with them, then I would strongly suggest you still send over the wire fraud and just have them initial the one page of that so that you have that in your file. You can find the wire fraud in the Express Docs at the very top. There's pamphlets and there's law of agency, lead base, wire fraud. There's short sale disclosures, and then there's mold and moisture if you want to use that one. I mean, you can disclose all day as much as you want. I don't care. Yes.
On Friday, we were gonna put an offer.
I mean, the buyer to call in. Yeah.
Because, you know,
Yes.
also verbal.
Well,
Inspection, but on the other side, when the inspection.
first of all, the seller is totally exposed because they didn't do the seller procured language for you to sign. For my Facebook audience, I always forget. The question was, you write an offer, seller has a inspection they provide, and then
It shows water damage.
it showed water damage in the basement. You advised the buyer to call the inspector to talk about it to feel comfortable, right? And then they wrote the offer. Right, and they decided to waive inspection after that. Right. Right. Okay. If they're smart, the seller will have that language about procuring the inspection that your buyer would have signed. The fact that they didn't exposes them legally. Now, whether or not they could be sued, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But if something, let's say, did they get the house? Okay. Well, if they did get the house and it closes, and let's say it mentioned water damage like that, okay? But now there's something horrifically wrong with the house somewhere else that it didn't even detail. There are court cases now where buyers are coming back after the fact and suing the sellers, saying it's reasonable to think that you would have hired a qualified inspector who would have caught these things that they did not. Therefore, you're on the hook, and they're suing the sellers. You in this situation, you could also be exposed as the buyer's agent, because whenever a seller offers an inspection, you better put in writing, this is a seller inspection that the seller bought. It was their inspector. They're offering to share it. If you want, we can get it. You could say, I know this inspector. They've inspected for other buyers. But you need to tell them, you need to realize, though, you can still do your due diligence, and you still have the right to hire an inspector to go in and inspect the house. Because just because the seller procures it, one to give you, does not mean that that is the only way you can see it. And if ever a listing agent says, no, there's no pre-inspections because we are only offering this, boy, that seller and that listing agent just put themselves up for even more liability, because they just broke the law by not allowing the buyer to do their own due diligence on the house. I would email. Well, you're not recommending or not. I'm saying you always put into writing anything that might expose you later. So you want in writing to your buyer saying, hey, this is a seller procured inspection. I just want to let you know that you can still do your own due diligence and hire your own inspector, because this inspector was hired by the seller. But we can get it for you if you want to review it, and then you can make a decision from there. Let me know. Okay. All right. Come on, you have a question. Okay, Xavier, what is it? So you're doing a 22 feasibility, extending it while they get permits. Right. So you have a seller. Let me understand this. And you have a buyer for commercial, and the buyer wants to buy it. They've agreed on a price. Yeah. So they've agreed on it, but neither party wants to write up a binding contract at the price. Mm-hmm. So my one concern is that we said, mm-hmm, if we do close this. Does he seem healthy, the 73-year-old? Is he smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, drinking Diet Coke? Okay, all right. Well, no, actually, that brings up a really good question, though, Xavier, and that is, this has happened to me. One of my first 2 years in it, I wrote up a deal. for a buyer and a seller, and then the seller died. What happens? Your contract, most likely, and my broker told me, kiss it goodbye, your contract's over. Because nobody knows right now who owns the property. I was lucky because the property went to 3 cousins, and all 3 were out of state, and all 3 were like, no, we want to just honor this. We just want the money. And luckily, they all agreed to that, and they all went ahead and signed it, and they proved to escrow that it didn't have to go through probate. It was a trust, and that they could go ahead. So I was lucky it was closed. But normally, if someone passes away, their contract is null and void because they can't perform on it. And who knows who's going to own that house now from the will. So, yeah, if you think your client's really old and you're concerned about pushing closing 12 to 18 months out while the buyer gets all their permits in line to do what they want with the building, then maybe you need to change the contract for an earlier closing, but they will at the same time sign some lease agreement with the with the seller so that they can continue to operate their business. That's my suggestion. Yes. Oh, we have a new agent, Alex Joby.
I have a question.
Great.
You'll probably be able to answer this question.
I hope.
So I have a pending property that's off market for sale by owner. We represent the buyer. We door knocked it.
Mm-hmm.
No.
No. Question from Alex. Can he put a sold sign up in the yard for an off-market deal representing the buyer?
Even if they get permission from the seller.
No. And here's why. Because I can tell you right now, there's an official complaint being investigated by the DOL by an agent who sold off market, who was using the excuse the seller wanted me to put that for sale sign up there so that I could let the neighbors know that I sold it, and then the buyer's agent put a big old sold sign on it. And it's gone to DOL as breaking the rules, and Northwest MLS also.
I figured for sure it was against rules.
Well,
you know
yeah.
how I feel about those.
Yeah.
Those are rules. Those are laws.
People,
my opinion on stuff.
People
there's
neither.
A rule and there's a law. I'm
Yeah.
willing to break rules and not willing to break laws. I just have a question to this.
What?
So once
No, because then it's sold. Signs down in 24 hours when sold. You got to remember, folks, it's off market. Off market says right in Form 47, which the seller is going to sign with the buyer, that I don't want you to advertise. Period. So when you put a sign up in there, the MLS requires it's on the MLS, and then everybody has a fair advantage. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, it was a good question. They learned from you, and we taught you before you made a mistake.
Yeah, I learned. Well, ask the question. Remember, rules.
Uh-huh.
Laws have problems.
Yeah. And on that note, yeah, there are fines, and they can be quite steep when you do pre-marketing. We're talking in the thousands. Who does? Parul has this question. Hi, Parul.
How do I get editable PDFs for my seller to sign?
How do I get
editable PDFs?
We don't have them. Why? I guess my confusion is why would you need an editable PDF of the disclosures? Personally, you should have your disclosures already pre-filled out with all your information where it needs to be and where the inspector's information is. And then that PDF, you just would load it up into Athenasign or into .loop to sign, and you send it off to your client. And when you're in that editing phase, you can check the boxes of what they have or what they're going to sign. That's how I do it. there's no need to actually go in and do editing of that. If you want, like on a team, a lot of teams like to take the Keller Williams out of the top and have branded as their team. That's fine, but they've been making their own. Okay?
Yeah, she's asking what forms.
Oh, Form 17? Okay. Can she watch? I'll show you. Here's how you do Form 17. You would, let's see. Let's find a transaction. I get what she's saying now. So Form 17 is one form that you'd want to send out to your client and have them check the boxes without printing it, and then it comes back to you, and then you can set up for electronic signature. So let me find, okay, I'll use this one I got going. So when you're here, you would like open your Form 17 that you loaded, and you guys aren't seeing this. Okay. Yeah, Form 17. Okay, so you've loaded Form 17, and now you're in transactions. So you would go up here and say, under File, Send Email. I'm doing it on my computer, my own.
Oh, okay, so that's good.
Yeah. So you would open the Form 17, and you pre-filled the top out form. Then you just check the box, and you hit Email. Now in email, you want to send it as a link, and you want to allow changes. And you could say how good the link's good. Then you put their name here, their email, whoever the people are, if there's two. You'd write a little message and say, here's Form 17, you need to answer all the questions. Open the link, you can check all the boxes. When you're done, save it. No need to print it because they will open up in my transaction desk, and I will be able to send it back with all the other papers you're going to sign for listing. Okay? So that's how you can send out an editable email. That makes sense? All got it? Okay, Pearl, there's your answer. All right, what's up next? Come on, you guys, there's issues going on out there. I can't believe you have no questions. Your turn.
I'm new, so I don't have anything yet.
Okay.
I'm just here to learn.
You're always asking questions. You have a doozy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's ask.
So,
You mean, okay, wait a minute. So you close and the seller, no, the buyers agree to allow the seller to keep stuff in the storage locker to a certain date. Yeah.
secure.
Oh,
And
in the
two-
garage?
In the garage.
So it's a condo or a house? Oh, okay,
And
so
then-
it's a house, so they
and then
could keep
two-
it in the garage.
And then two separate areas.
And
And that was when
so they were able to keep stuff in the garage and two separate areas somewhere else in the house for a period of time. Okay. Well, what's this seller walking around the property nitpicking stuff out? Okay. Well, technically, things in the yard are not attached to a house. If there's a swing set, that's not attached to anything. That can go with the seller. Right, but now it's already closed. Okay, if it's closed, whatever the seller left on the property is now the property of the buyer. The fact that they said that this certain stuff that they acknowledge is there for so long, then that remains seller and they have to remove it. But yes, after you close, a seller's lost its opportunity to walk around their property and suddenly decide, I want my swing set. Oh, I'd like these little decorative things in the garden. It's like, so what? You know, is the buyer want to keep all these things? Well, yeah, it's the buyer's property now, and quite honestly, the seller has no right to even walk on the property without probably notifying the buyer first that we're coming to get things. Yeah.
And then it's my friend.
And they're not respecting it?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, okay. So you got it resolved. Good.
But I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, 22D says right on it. Everything left on that property at closing, at 9 p.m. the day of closing now has become possession of the buyer. Yeah, we don't get to continually go back and take things from the property forever. We have to have a cutoff, and that's closing. Okay? That wasn't complicated at all. I thought you had a doozy. That was easy. Oh, okay. Okay. One thing, you guys, I want you to think about when you're out there, and that is taking on duties. Okay? Especially nowadays, buyers are getting really anxious about, getting in properties and this, that, and the other. And it happens on the buy side, happens on the sell side. And agents will say things like, hey, I'll go down to the city and I'll investigate, see if you can get permits to push the house out back. Or I'll review your whole resale certificate for you and I'll let you know if there's any concerns. You don't have to worry about that. And what's going on are these agents, and a lot of the times it's newer agents or they're old saucy agents who just haven't learned the rules along the way, are taking this on because they want to be feel like it's being a full service agent and going over and above the top, so they'll refer you business. But you all need to aware that when you take on something, then you're taking that on as the expert, and that you will follow it through till completion and it'll be correct. So if you say, I'm going to the city and I'm going to investigate permits or anything down there, you better hope that you did it correctly. Another one. Well, what are the crime statistics in here about pedophiles? Oh, don't worry, I'll look it all up. Oh, yeah, no pedophile. Don't worry about it. Well, what may not be on there right now is that there's a Section 3 pedophile that's actually scheduled to move next door at the house they're buying, but it's not on there yet because they're not living there yet. But you assured them that no Section 3 pedophiles are on their street. Boom, suddenly it pops up 2 days before or a week before, but you already told them that. They close, and now they find out this moved next door. You will be sued. Absolutely. Because you told them, no, there are none. So you do not take on extra duties like this ever. These are responsibilities your buyer takes on or your seller because you're not an expert. You don't know if you're talking to the right people at the city. You don't know if, the day you looked on crime statistics that in a week it's going to change and suddenly it's going to change, who's living in the street, but you're not watching it every day. So just be aware that when you take on anything beyond helping them sign a contract and get to mutual and just negotiate the contract, that you are held accountable. Okay.
What point do you mention that you want
What point in the contract or in the whole point or the whole time with your buyer do you mention you might want to check to see if there's sex offenders? I'll be really honest. You never mention that ever. No. First of all, it says on Form 17, the last page, the onus is on the buyer to investigate the neighborhood. And that it says right there, this is not answering if there's murders in this house, suicides in this house, not talking about sex offenders or any crime, nothing. It's spelled out in Form 17. Generally, as far as like sex offenders, that is something usually your buyer will bring up, not you, if it's a big concern. So there's no reason to bring it up unless they do. And then if they do, I would refer them to a website where they can research it for themselves, which they more than likely will already know about it and already be searching it. But yeah, there's no need to bring that up. I've never brought up sex offenders unless they did. Okay? Yeah, right back. Form 34 and not 65B. Okay.
So,
Okay. Is seller, you put it in the contract or handwritten, or did they send? Because you're the seller. Oh, but the seller put it in there.
put it, so when.
Okay, you're dealing with a stupid listing agent. First of all, you would never, ever put on a 34 a leaseback terms. There are forms on the MLS that we use. Be aware of all your forms. If your seller is giving a rent back to a buyer, you will use Form 65B and it will be in the contract. When they sent over a Form 34 saying, probably, let me guess, it said something, seller is going to allow the buyer to live in the house till this date?
It was the opposite. The buyer.
Right, but it's a rent back. It's still a rent back. The buyer's letting the seller stay in the house. It's a rent back. But the listing agent, when they sent back the offer, put in the Form 34 saying the terms of the rent back. And did it say we get to live here for free for 1 month? We'll be out on this date. And that's all it said? Yeah, they were stupid. If you're ever in a situation like that again, throw out the Form 34 and put in a 65B, because 65B explains the responsibility of utilities, that the seller is responsible for them till they leave, because escrow can't do a 22K if the seller's going to live there because they can't close out their account. It also explains insurance. Your buyer better be calling their insurance company and saying, we're closing on this date, but we're really not taking possession for 30 days. And I want to make sure the homeowner policy that we picked will cover the house for 30 days. Because they may have to buy a special rider on their policy because they're not in possession. Because when you get homeowner policy, they assume right up front you're moving in, that not someone else is living there. So they need to make sure they're covered. That's in 65B. Right now, you just have a loose-ended Form 34, and it could get really messy if the seller doesn't move out in 30 days. What if they don't get a house or whatever? You know what I'm saying? I would, even at this point, I would send over a 65B and say, hey, we need to have an official 65B signed, and just say your broker said it needs to be done. But you do need to have a conversation with your buyer about their homeowner insurance to make sure they are covered for 30 days. Okay?
So for the next time.
If ever you get a remark says seller would like a rent back, you put a 65B in there if you're wanting to do the rent back. Never handwrite. Never handwrite anything that there's a form already made out there for you to use. Okay?
Is there a limit on the term of a rent back?
No. The limit on the term of the rent back is between the buyer and seller, because you can fill in however many days.
Could that be a problem though with
Well, then that's the next question. Will it be a problem for the loan if you're giving them like a 6-month rent back? Well, that's a discussion between them and their lender. You know, if there's a long-term rent back, they should alert their lender about it, because they're going to see the contract, they're going to see the 65B, and they're going to see the possession date on the front. So they need to understand what's going on and make sure that they're okay with it. Yes. You're a little bit off today.
I'm a little bit off today. A lot of the.
Like who? Name one. So you're talking about people who go online, apply online with a lender, and then they get a pre-approval, and they might be talking with someone, God knows where in the U.S.
Right.
And do I have any knowledge of having trouble to close? Well, let me put it to you this way. In this current market, that buyer is foolish and they're never going to get and win a multiple offer, because I don't know any listing agent who would ever sign a contract with a company called Walk It that I've not even heard of. That's all done on the internet and they're not physically even talking with people. And probably the person they talk to is a 1-800 number, I guess. Yeah, it's a shady operation and a lot of them are popping up. And in our market right now, I mean, I just tell buyers, okay, folks, true story. I got it going on right now with a buyer. They went through Costco to get their home loan. But see, what Costco does is they just have random lenders out there who are willing to discount to the terms of Costco. But you don't have any idea of where the lender is going to be or anything. They just kind of put it out there and let a lender pick you. This is the way it was described to me by my buyer. So it's a very complicated story too. He was picked up by a lender in Kansas City, some little mom and pop operation I never heard of. He got all pre-approved. Then I got a referral from an agent in Kansas City for my client, which is fine because I didn't meet the buyer yet. This is how I met the buyer. It was a referral. And I said, yeah, I'll pay a referral fee. And he says, yeah, I do it for my buddy who is this lender. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's odd. Maybe the lender is just a family friend of this guy up here. But when I met the buyer, I said, well, what is your relationship with the lender? And he explained to me the whole Costco and how he found him thing. And I said, so this isn't any family or anything? He goes, no. I go, are you attached? He said, no. And I said, good, because here's why. And I said, I'm going to be burning a bridge down there because the lender has a buddy who's an agent that whenever he's getting these Costco, I suspect, loans going around the country, his buddy then finds him the agent, so they get a referral, and I'm willing to bet they somehow split that referral fee when it comes back. So I doubt I'll get any referrals from this Costco lender again, but I told him the truth. I just said, you're spending $500,000 and you want to use some lender in Kansas City, it's not going to fly with the buyer or the sellers up here now. But if they choose to persist and they do want to use this lender, then one, you can choose not to work with them. Two, you can choose to work with them. And then I would say let them lose a couple times at bat. Because whenever a buyer loses, I always call the agent the next day unless I actually have a conversation when they're saying, sorry, you didn't get it. And I always say to the listing agent, congratulations. I'm really happy that you guys got a better offer than us. But I was really hoping you could maybe help me educate my client because they're new to the game. And I just trying to get them to do more like the offer you got. Can you let me know what about our offer was not acceptable? And you get a couple of offers like that where they say, well, who's this Walk It? We don't know. We're not going to go with them. Then your buyer will slowly learn that, having a 1-800 lender is not a good idea. Okay? No, as a listing agent?
No, when you talk to the listing agent, you get that in writing?
No, usually I just talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually talk.
Because I'm assuming that is something that you would have told.
Well, if I had, let's say, 10, 20 offers and 20 people emailed me, I'm a nice guy. I probably would reply to them eventually. But a lot of agents just won't reply. They're just like, I'm busy. I can't respond to all these emails. Whereas you catch them on the phone, they're not having to type or anything. They're just talking to you for like 45 seconds. And the other thing is building a rapport with you and that agent for future deals. That, you're being respective of their time. At the same time, congratulating them and, joke a little bit about whatever and find out. I mean, I even do that with pending sales, you guys. You're doing market analysis out there, right? You know how many agents show CMAs to clients and they go, well, here's the actives, here's this pendings and here's the sold. But they know nothing about the pending, nothing. But it shows the pendings are selling in 4 days, 5 days. Especially if you're trying to help a seller or a buyer. You want to know what's going on with those pendings. You want to pick up a phone and call the agent and just say, hey, I'm working with a buyer in the area and we're writing up an offer and I was just hoping if you could give me a call about your pending sale because I'm trying to find out how many offers you got. You know, they'll respond. A lot of times they'll pick up the phone and if they don't, I'll say you can text me or call me back. But I almost always get responses pretty quick because suddenly I find out, wow, this pending got 10 offers. This one got 12 offers. This one got 8 offers. Well, you just now have a really good conversation for your buyer because you can say, guess what? These are in the area. Guess what? All these buyers didn't get this are on this house that you're going after now. So if you want to win it, we got to be really aggressive because it's going to be really stiff competition. So we're talking waiving. Seller, you're trying to figure out a price to go on market. You can say, well, we can feel pretty confident in this price point. We're going to definitely escalate. And if we look at the solds, we can see where they all went on in the same price range. Look where they're all closing. But now a lot of sellers say, great, well then let's go on what they're all closing. No. This is telling us we don't want to go on that price because if we do, the buyers will probably say you're overpriced because everything else is going on in the market at a lower price and then escalating to that. So it's a hard line sometimes for a seller to understand. It's better to go on what looks reasonable because that will most likely get you the multiples right now in the current market. And it will boost you up to that sale. Because I've seen sellers who will say, oh, well, all these got escalated this and they put it on that price. And often those sit because the buyer's like, oh, that's really overpriced. So anyway, you always want to call the pendings. I know what's going on. And one of my favorite questions when I ask after how many offers, I go, oh, that's great. And then I'll go, well, then I can assume, did you go way over the price?
Oh, I do the same.
And you'd be surprised what the answers you get. You know, some of them will be, you know, I can't even discuss the price. Oh, no, I know that. I know. I'm not asking for the price. I'm just trying to get a range idea. Like, did it go over 400,000? Yes. Oh, great. So I'm assuming that it went under 425. Well, yeah. Okay. Thank you. You gave me a great information. Thank you. But in asking those questions too, you'll be surprised how often a listing agent will just tell you what the price was. You never tell the price of any property closing until it's closed, period. It's confidential. And guess what? If that deal fell apart, you don't want everybody to know what the details were of that price at all. So you never tell them the price, but you could tell them how many offers you got. You could say it went way overpriced, you know, like I would. I'll say, yeah, it went way, way, way overpriced, like so high, way beyond what we even thought. And the other agent will go, really? That's really good information. You're welcome. Or I'll say, yeah, I went a little over.
You will say.
Yeah, because you're not telling them a price. No questions yet? Seriously? You're always quiet. Okay.
No, I already did. On the rent backs.
Oh, that wasn't you. Was that
I
you?
followed up on it, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. You're both new. I know you have questions. Via has you out there walking the streets getting clients. Okay. All right. Anything on Facebook? No? Oh my God, Peru, I got it down in one time. All right. If you don't have questions, then I'll just talk about whatever I want. What do I want to talk about?
Preferably the problems that you're seeing.
Problems and contracts coming through. Well, guess what? I don't review them anymore. That's a good question for Greg. That'd be an excellent question. I should ask him that. But I would say one common thing right now is agents writing their own language on forms that came out in last February, and they've never bothered to look at what the new forms are. And they're still writing all sorts of crazy language that they don't need to because it's been addressed. The only thing they really didn't address was how to write up a release of earnest money. That's the one thing the MLS didn't write a form on because they said it's a loaded gun and they don't feel like they can answer that. But almost everything else, people giving additional deposits on down payment. There's a form on that now. I mean, not on escrow, additional money on making up a difference between appraisal. There's a form out there now, 22 AD. A lot of people haven't even read it. They don't even know it exists. So I always say scan through the forms before you write language because there's probably a form already for it. If not, you need to be very abbreviated. Chandelier stays with the house. That's pretty abbreviated, Like you said over there, seller can leave in the garage to this date this stuff. But if you're writing language on one thing, a form that's already exists, you're foolish because what you're writing will never be as tight as what the lawyers wrote. And then if you're writing just language just to create it, and I've seen lots of people that want to go in and basically write a whole contract because they're crossing this out and doing this and that, you're setting yourself up for a big lawsuit. If you can't answer something like in a sentence that's really abbreviated because it's too complicated, one, you should call Greg or call me and talk about it. And two, we might just tell you that your client needs to have a lawyer write that up because you're not a lawyer. Because if the agents I see writing paragraph long to try to get something across and they're trying to use the legal language that they're seeing, they're practicing law, and we're not allowed to practice law. We're not lawyers. So if something went wrong, that's the first thing a lawyer is going to pick at them on. They practice law. Want more war stories to scare you? Can't think of any right now. Everybody's been really good lately. You're looking at a property and it's an unpermitted ADU. That's fine. They've disclosed it's unpermitted. Yeah.
What does that mean?
ADU is an additional dwelling unit like a mother-in-law. A lot of people will put them, totally make one in their basement, separate entrance. They've been renting it out all these years while they live in the house. That's totally legal. It's just not permitted with the city as an additional dwelling unit. And
like a little
yeah, it doesn't matter. Even if they put a little tiny home in the back that they're renting, it doesn't matter. When you sell it, you have to disclose it's not permitted with the city. Because what it means is, if you're buying this house thinking you're going to rent the house and then you're going to rent the little additional dwelling unit to two separate families, you may not be able to. Because neighbors know what's going on with your house. And as long as you live in the house, no one can tell you you can't rent to someone out back because it's not a rental home. It's your home. But if you move out and now you want to rent to two separate families and you don't have it licensed as an additional dwelling unit out back, neighbors can turn you in the city. The city will come out. They will actually give you so many days to rip out the stove in the additional dwelling unit. And they will come back and look to verify. And they will tell you you can only rent to one family or you will be paying large amounts of fees to the city because you're breaking the law. So that's why they disclose it's not a licensed additional dwelling unit. So those sell all the time. But if your client's saying, we want to buy it because one day we want to rent to two different families, then I would just say, well, you need to investigate with the city because you don't take it on, right? And find out if you can permit it. Because depending, sometimes, I know in Seattle there's a period where they were very strict about giving anybody else that permit. I think it might be loosened up a little now. I'm not sure because they're trying to make it more densely populated. And it costs money. You're in the thousands to get that permit. So, does that answer?
Yep.
Same thing on Form 17. They've remodeled and your buyer's freaked out because they say, yeah, we've done a remodeling in the house, but no permits. And now your buyer's like, what do you mean no permits? 9 out of 10 times, anyone who remodels the interior of their home probably have done it without permits. Because it's a hassle to get permits. Their contractor will tell them it's a hassle and it's expensive and why bother? We're just remodeling your bathroom. And they'll use licensed, bonded contractors. And they've disclosed this, no permits, and the house will sell without permits. You have a home inspector, have them look at the work. Where they're getting permits generally is when they do to a stud type remodel or they're adding an addition. Because once you bust out, the neighbors know what you're doing. So, okay? So that's a common thing your buyer will freak out on. That you'll have to walk them up the wall. And just say, hey, they didn't get permits. Doesn't mean the work's bad. They just didn't get permits. That's what our inspector's for, is to look at the work to see if he thinks it looks like it's quality. But if you don't want to buy the house if they don't have permits, that's fine. It's your decision.
So once you buy the house and then when you're ready to sell, do you have to say something about that because it's a generation away?
You have to say everything you know about the house when you sell it. So when you go to sell it and it says, has there been remodeling the house? Well, yes, because there was when you bought it. Has there been any permits? No, because you were told that. So it's knowledge. So you do tell it, and then they'll ask about it, and then you probably would say, maybe at the bottom of Form 17, say, all remodeling was done prior to ownership. So they know. So in a way, that might put an ease a buyer thinking, well, they've lived there for the last 5 years on that remodeling, so probably it's okay. All right? Question, you just walked in the door. You must. I need one.
Okay, what's the average earnest money amount these days?
Oh, good question. What's an average earnest money? Well, I don't know if there's an average. It's a case by case. But if you got a client who's spending $850,000 on a house and they say we'll give $10,000 earnest money, that won't fly. I mean, the contract says 5% of purchase price is all that will ever be at risk as earnest money. So I tell my clients, this is what I tell. You can do it if you want. I just tell them, you're in a multiple offer situation. We only get one time to bat. There's no they're going to come back and we can change our offer again with a few others. Don't even think that. It's just lay everything on the table, all your cards, and hope they pick you. And I say in the process of doing that, if I think about it, if you're the seller, 5% is the most you could have at risk. Well, you better be putting 5% of that purchase price as earnest money in a multiple offer situation because you want to show that seller you put all the skin in the game. And some people will put even more than 5% as earnest money. And that's fine, but only 5% is ever at risk. It's in the contract. Have you read all the paragraphs in Form 21? Look under earnest money, and it will disclose. It will say in there that only 5% purchase price. So if you're in a multiple offer and you don't even put 5% up, well, that's probably a little check mark against your offer right there. If it's only us writing an offer, generally I put around 3% earnest money. I'm not going to tell my client to put the whole 5%. It's a different story if you're in a low price point. If you're under $300,000, I've seen people do $1,000, $2,000 earnest money because that's all they've got. But if you've got a client that's spending in the 500 where it's high escalations and everybody's throwing money and they want to put like 3,000 down, you need to have a serious talk with them, because you got to put enough down to be serious and be considered.
But when they do
The only thing that's at risk is whatever you put up as earnest money up to a point of 5% of purchase price. it's at risk the minute you deposit it. If you deposit less than 5%, that's all that's ever at risk. The seller can't come back later and say, you broke contract, so I want 5%. Sorry, no, we only deposit 3, that's all that's ever at risk. Now, a non-refundable deposit, that's a whole different issue. Yeah.
Will you talk through an escalation to someone who knows nothing really?
Okay, talk through an escalation in what way?
So what I understand about an escalation is when I'm presenting an offer, when I'm having my people present an offer, it would
Yeah.
say something to the effect of the house costs $210, we're offering $250, but if it's going to go above $250, then we'll go $7 million more than $250.
Wait, you lost me.
Yeah.
So they're willing to escalate to so much at a certain price
I'm
point?
trying to understand how it works because I've heard about it quite a bit. When would I use it?
An escalation?
How would I
Multiple offer.
explain it? How would I explain it? And how would I include it?
Okay, well, you would include a multiple offer, which is 35E, with your contract when you send it over. It's one of your addendums.
In other words, if I'm presenting it to
you better have your escalation in that contract.
the usual contract.
Yes.
Okay.
When you're doing escalations, you're still writing up your normal offer. But the escalation addendum is saying, seller, we're willing to escalate the price we're offering you in this offer up to this higher price, and we're going to do it by saying we'll pay this much more than the next best price offer. You're spelling out how high you're willing to bid up the price.
So if you're offering $250, but you're saying that you would go as high as $270,
then your escalation would say you're willing to go up to $270, and then you got to decide with your buyer what increments do you want to be over the next best. Now, I always tell my buyer, when you're putting an increment to be over the next best offer, you need to be thinking about making sure that you're putting enough money on the table. It's hard for the seller to say, whoa, I don't want to leave all that cash on the table. But if you do a really low increments, then it's easier to go back to the other offer, not yours. You might say, we'll do better, but we'll pay $3,000 more than the next one. Well, $3,000 isn't a lot of money to buyers out there. So if the other offer has better terms than you, rather than come to you to say we need to change all these terms to get 3,000, they'll just call up that other offer that had better terms and they'll say, well, you match this other offer by 3,000. We'll show you that it did actually go that high. If you do, we'll sign with you because we just need to change the escalator. And those buyers will say, yeah, I'll pay you 3,000 more dollars, no problem.
So then has the seller seen the ceiling that the buyer would go to?
Seller sees everything when you submit. They're going to see
why would anything be below the highest escalation price? And is that the point?
The whole reason an escalation addendum exists is to keep in mind we're trying to make it a legitimate price raise. If you didn't have it and we were out there in a bidding war, how do you know that there was even anyone there? The escalation addendum, when you read it, says you have to show them the offer, the other offer that drove it to the price that you added your increment on, to show that it's legitimate and that's why it's gone up. Okay?
Interesting. Yeah, I know.
And it assures buyers out there that they're not being bluffed. Now, the question is, what are you going to do when the seller comes back and says, we're going to throw out the escalation addendum, we'll sell to you, but we're going to sell at this price? And your buyer's like, well, but you told me they're going to see the other offers. What do you say?
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I look at them and I go, well, I know
price.
they're supposed to show you the other offers, but they're refusing to because they want to throw it out. Well, how do I know there's other offers at that price, Eric? Well, we don't. We don't know if there's other offers to that price. The seller is just telling you, you want it, this is what you're going to pay. So, do you want it or not?
So the escalation price or cap could be potentially the, the price that I would settle on, regardless of anything else, because you can take the highest price without having to really do anything to justify it.
The only way you could, okay, the question is if you had an escalation and they wanted to sell it to you at the top of your escalation, but not show you the other offer, they have to remove 35E from the contract. You've got to cross it out. You got to cross it out on page 1, and then you would write on page 1 or use the counter offer addendum, and you would write in it, here's the price you're going to buy, period.
Okay.
And we're not, and then you're not seeing it. The only time they have to show you another offer is when you have an escalation, Jim. If they throw it out and said, this is our price, you want it, they'll never show you that offer. Well, listing agents apply a lot of things. It doesn't mean it's true. They're negotiating. They could be bluffing you. Yeah, it's legal to bluff a client because what are your jobs? When you work with the seller, you're trying to give them the most amount of money in the least amount of time. And if you're negotiating a deal that's going to get them another $25,000 because they're going to throw the escalation out because you don't have anything that's going to drive it up to $25,000, and you discuss your strategy with your seller, and you better discuss all strategies before you do it, then they say, yeah, let's try it.
Okay. They can go down the list. Oh, sorry. I just want to. Okay, so the asking price is 200. The buyer comes in and says, "I'll buy it for 205, but I'll go all the way up to 220 at $5,000, $5,000 increments if you have a buyer who wants to buy it for 215, say for example."
Yeah.
Then they can just say, throw away 35E and make the price 220 if you want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can.
Often that happens.
But in your situation, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because you said they offered 205, escalating 5,000 increments up to 220, right? And they have another offer for 215, right? So why bother throwing out the escalation? Because they'll add the 5 and it'll be the 220, which your guy already
Okay,
offered.
well then if it was 225, I kind of get it.
Get it? But now let's say in the same scenario, you offer 200, you offered to go up to in 5,000 increments, but you offered to go up to 230,000. Now the next best is 215. So if they use the escalation, they'll add your 5 and sell for 220. But or they might come back to you and say, we like your offer, and my seller's willing to sell to you, but they're going to throw out the escalation addendum, and they're going to sell it to you for 230,000. Take it or leave it.
Okay, so there's sort of a.
And then you got to talk to your buyer and say, we don't know what the other offers
So
will.
then
We'll
did
never
you-
see.
Did you offer too much? I mean, I guess
You're going where you
is-
should stop thinking.
Okay.
Don't start thinking, did you offer too much or
Okay.
nothing? You made a deal.
Okay.
You made a contract that was good enough in a multiple that now that seller's talking to you to sell to you.
Okay.
You
Yes,
should be
that's the
really
way to look at it.
happy,
Yes.
and now you need to talk to your buyer about trying to get a deal together that works for him.
Okay.
Eric, I have a question.
Okay?
So when we think like we have door,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that case, in case of lower, able to pay enough.
Right.
So
22 additional deposit on a low appraisal is separate of a 35E escalation. They are two separate entities of your contract.
yeah, but when
If you throw out an escalation dim, it does not change 22 AD.
are you preparing your buyer?
It's not preparing a buyer, it's just talking to your buyer. If you're going to escalate to a certain price, you should also be going, if you're doing an escalation, you're probably talking to your buyer. Do you want to waive financing? Do you want to waive appraisal? Do you want to release earnest money? You're going through all these things that you know other buyers are doing. And you have all explained to your buyer in writing all the kind of things buyers are doing and all the risk associated in writing. So you have proof that they can never say they didn't. And then on the additional deposit appraisal, your conversation is going to be, well, I know we're escalating up to 270. I mean, this is what I have with my client all the time. They'll say, well, I'll say, do you want to do an additional deposit in case there's a low appraisal or not? Because if we waive appraisal, then if your appraisal comes in less than the purchase price, you are responsible to make up that difference or you'll lose your earnest money. And they'll be like, oh, well, how confident are you, Eric, that that will appraise that price we're going to go for? And you better be saying, I feel confident by looking at all the comps. I think it will, and I know the appraiser will take into account that they have multiple offers. But buyer, I cannot guarantee you this will appraise. I don't know. I think everything here looks like it will, no problem, but I can't guarantee it because I'm not the appraiser. And, buyer has to determine if they're willing to take on these risks. But they're doing it because you've explained thoroughly why and you put it in writing so that you have proof that you did it. So they can't sue you later and say, they told me to waive all these things and they never explained to me these risks, so I'm going to sue them. If you're having a contract in front of you and there's your buyer and you're filling in the contract, and while you're doing it, you're talking to them and go, well, do you think you want to waive financing? Because a lot of people are. Oh, okay, well, what does that involve? Well, if you waive it and you don't close, you lost your earnest money. Oh, okay, well, let's waive it. You just had a verbal conversation. How can you prove later when they lost their earnest money and now they're suing you and they say, you never ever told me there was a risk in doing this. I trusted you that you were telling me, you would tell me what my risks are. You're going to lose a lawsuit because you should have, after that long conversation and you got everything signed, you should have sent him an email right afterwards and said, hey, I want to follow up on our conversations. I want you to understand, here's the risk of everything you did just waive. Please respond back that you're okay with it before I send over the offer. Because when they click respond back, yes, I'm okay. Guess what? Now you're fine.
Oh, that's a great.
Anything you talk with a client about waiving that has a risk involved better be in writing. Anything you talk with a client sounds anything remotely like you're giving advice they're relying on that could backfire later, you better put in writing. It's not just contingencies. It could be anything. Okay?
When you put the starting price or
An escalation clause, you just fill in, there's two things only you fill in. The first blank says, we are willing to pay up to a certain price. You fill in whatever price you're willing to pay up to. And then the next blank is, we're willing to do it in increments. Or it's the opposite. But those are the only two things you fill out. You don't fill anything else out on 35E.
so when you put the offer,
Yeah.
so
That's up to you. But escalation clauses start at your offer price, period. So whatever you were saying up front you're offering, if there's no escalations and this is the price, that's the price you put in on page 1. And the escalator then will go start adding up from that point going higher.
start with asking.
Yeah. And then when the seller's looking at these, if you say 200 to 250 and then they have 200 to 240. They're going to write on the escalation, I have a 240. You're going to add in your increment, and here's the new purchase price. Be sure you tell the lender and escrow what the final purchase price is, because if you don't cross out on page 1 and write in the new purchase price there as well, they may only see that. They may not notice 35E. So you need to make sure they understand what your purchase price is. Harul, hello.
I have an experience, but will ask the question first. How do you input variable commission on 1A?
To the listing agent or to both agents?
That's the question.
Well, I'm asking her. Harul. All right. If you have a complicated fee structure on commission where it says the commission, whatever, on the listing agreement, I would probably say fill in see attached. And then I would attach to it like page 3 of listing agreement and spell out here's the commissions. But be aware, if like they say at this price we'll do 6%, at this price we're doing 5%, the MLS requires very clear explanation of what the commissions are. If you post 3, you pay 3. If you post 2.5, you pay 2.5. In this one, I wouldn't post the commission there. I would say see remarks. And then in your remarks section, it's got to spell out clearly seller to pay 2.5% to this price will pay 3% above that price. It has to be in very clear language that the buyer's agent can see, or it will backfire on the seller and you as the agent. All right? I keep looking at you. You look like you have another question. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine. No, we're working on it. The thing is, things I'll share with you that I know other other brokerages are using, I'll share them with you because I know they were written by a lawyer. We're working on our end. The lawyer has actually started working on our forms. It's just the problem is he's doing all of Ben Kinney's enterprises, so it's all his companies. So it's me trying to squeeze in whenever I can get squeezed in. So they are coming. Elaine. Elaine, sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have an answer for you. Okay. You got a client. They're trying to get a bridge loan. Do you guys know what a bridge loan is? Okay, bridge loan is a lender will look at a seller and say, look, we feel confident you're going to sell. You have all this equity built up in there. So we're going to give you a temporary loan to be your down payment for the new home, because as soon as this is sold, you're going to pay off the bridge loan instantly so that then you can get in the new home. So it's a way to not have to sell contingent or buy contingent is what it is. So you have a client in the process of getting a bridge loan, but offers are reviewed tomorrow. How many offers?
He doesn't have any in hand yet.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, it's a real long shot because you said you only have a pre-qual letter, not a pre-approval. And if I'm in multiple offer land, I would throw you out right there because I would just say, we don't even know if they're going to get pre-approved.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I told them. So,
Right. If you have a buyer and they want to try for it, then maybe what you need to do is write it up, but now you got to sell it. So you need to start talking to the listing agent, get on their good side, and you got to have that lender call them and say, hey, this pre-approval is going to be done a day later. All their assets, everything's there. I want to assure you that there's not going to be an issue. Now, waiving earnest money, like you said, and releasing it. If you have a pre-qual, I wouldn't because that's not even been through underwriting. Anytime you even have a pre-approval, just a normal pre-approval, it still hasn't been underwriting. And until it goes through underwriting, you don't know if they're going to be able to close. Because even if they give it pre-approval, all they're saying is, we have all the documents we need to prove that you will be able to get a loan. But until it goes through underwriting, that's where any red flags start popping up and things that might get in the way of closing that the buyer didn't disclose yet. So that's why I like working with lenders who do full underwriting pre-approvals, because that means the underwriter has actually looked through the entire file, identified red flags, they've already resolved red flags, so that this buyer can feel more confident in making a decision of waiving financing or not, because they're not so worried because they know there should be no issue in front of them except they just need the appraisal. If I had a pre-qual, I wouldn't even advise them to release their earnest money because they're setting themselves up to lose it.
yeah,
Because you don't know if they're even going to close. And I would never advise the client to waive earnest money non-refundable or waive financing without them talking to their lender and having the lender's input on making that decision. Because you don't know the details of their loan. And you're advising them to waive it when they might talk to the lender and the lender says, no. We haven't been through full underwriting. And remember that period where you were unemployed, that might be an issue. And so we got to figure if we can even close yet. Well, if I heard that from my lender, I'm not going to waive financing. But if you sat there, yeah, go ahead, waive. It's what everyone's doing. Don't worry, you got a pre-approval. You're going to close. Don't bother talking to your lender. You just put a knife in your back. And you did it, which is really hard to do when it's yourself. But you did it.
up against the wall.
Oh yeah, I guess. I haven't thought that far about it. But anyway, yeah, you don't want to do that. So you need, whenever you waive in financing or you're going to release earnest money, you want to bring the lender in and have them be a part of the conversation so that they're aware of what their client's about to do.
So you could ask them if they thought that would be a good option for you.
Well, I can tell you, no
negotiate.
lender's going to say it's a good option, and no lender's going to say, oh yeah, go ahead and waive it. But what a lender will say to them is, hey, you've been through full underwriting. We feel really good about your file. There should be no red flags. We just need to get an appraisal. So if you feel confident in that, then go ahead.
What's that called? I've only done
Start calling your lenders. Call a lender. Say, hey, I got a pre-approval. That's great. I want to know, is this a fully underwritten pre-approval or is this just like a normal?
And do you put that on?
Everyone writes their letters differently.
But you would obviously.
Well, what you do is you tell the listing agent when you send it over, it's a fully underwritten pre-approval. I'm having the lender call you to let you know it is fully underwritten.
And if you have a fully waive the finance?
I'm never going to tell anyone to waive a financing because they have a fully underwritten loan. That is a decision that a buyer makes, and that is a decision they will make understanding the risk.
Got it.
Okay? Just because you have a fully underwritten loan, things could still go bad. What if you,
Lose their job or something.
yeah, they lose their job. Suddenly they can't buy it. And you waived it.
If that was the
They would lose their earnest money. If they lost their job, can't close on the house, you lost your earnest money because you released it, because you felt confident that you would be able to close. That's why you have to explain risks, and that's why they make a decision, and that's why you never guarantee. You always have to say, I can't guarantee it. I think things will be good this way, but I can't guarantee it. All right? There. That's it. Another week.
Another week with Eric.
Yeah.
That was good.
Can I just ask you one?
What's a slight question as opposed to?
Not on this thing. If you're the listing agent,
Sure,
is that how
you can. That's a decision you and your seller make.
okay.
That you have every, it happens. There's lots of offers, and sometimes they'll take the top three and say you're neck and neck. So we just want your highest and best. Send it over.
Yeah, I was wondering that.
It's whatever you feel that you can do. There's pluses and minuses to everything you do.
Yeah, what would be a
If you go to
downside?
those three offers and say they're all neck and neck,
Yeah.
and now we want your highest and best, one of those three offers may say, I'm not even going to play that game, we're out. You just lost him. What if the other two are like pissed off? Buyers walk sometimes.
Oh, yeah, that's.
So you got to think about it.
Yeah. That's what I was
Yeah. But it's negotiations. You can negotiate what you want. That is totally fine. Okay? And let me find. Oh, here we are. You're welcome. Okay, stop recording. Stop.